Welcome back, guys, to MysteryCon. On this channel, I narrate conspiracy theories to help you sleep and relax. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe, and also share this video with your friends and family to help them fall asleep too. Please let me know where you're watching this from and what time it is for you. Now sit back, relax, and let's begin.
I never believed in conspiracies, at least not until I uncovered the first piece of the puzzle. I had been a journalist for over a decade, chasing down stories from local scandals to international affairs. But this was different. It wasn't just about breaking a story. It was about unraveling a truth that could change everything. It all started on a cold autumn evening. I was wrapping up a typical day in my cramped office when I got the call. The voice on the other end was low, almost whispering, like they didn't want anyone to overhear. "I have information about something much bigger than anything you've ever covered," the caller said. "Meet me at the old library on Elm Street. Midnight. Come alone." I wasn't sure whether to dismiss it as another hoax or take it seriously. The temptation to find out was too strong. I arrived at the library, my heart pounding in my chest. The place had been abandoned for years, and the darkness inside seemed to swallow any hope of safety. But then I saw him, a man standing in the shadows, his face hidden by the brim of his hat. He handed me a manila folder without saying a word. I opened it cautiously, expecting to find something mundane. But what I saw inside was nothing like I expected. The documents were filled with strange codes, cryptic messages, and references to a group called the Hidden Order. There were papers on diseases, a mysterious agenda, and most shocking of all, a diagram of world events, all connected by invisible threads. I stared at the papers, trying to make sense of them. They seemed too far-fetched, even for me. But then I realized something. This wasn't just some random theory. It was real. The world was being manipulated, and I had just been handed the first clue to prove it. A chill ran down my spine as the man in the shadows gave me a final warning before disappearing. "You'll never be safe once you dig deeper. But you have to know the truth." As I walked out of the library, clutching the folder tightly, the weight of what I had just discovered started to settle in. The world was not as it seemed, and I was about to find out just how deep the rabbit hole went. There was no turning back now. The next few days felt like a blur. I couldn't shake the images of the documents from my mind. Every time I tried to focus on something else, the papers I had received kept pulling me back. There was something important hidden in those pages, something I wasn't seeing yet. I decided to dive in and figure out what exactly I was holding in my hands. The first thing I noticed was the pattern. The documents outlined a series of mysterious health crises that had affected the world over the past few decades. Diseases would appear seemingly out of nowhere, sometimes targeting specific countries, regions, or demographics. The outbreaks often sparked panic, government responses were inconsistent, and the public was left in the dark. But as I studied the documents more closely, one thing became clear: there was a deliberate structure behind it all. At the heart of it all was a company, an international pharmaceutical conglomerate. The documents suggested that this company was somehow involved in the outbreaks. They had advanced research facilities and a history of experimenting with new drugs. But the real question was, why were they connected to so many mysterious epidemics? What was their role in all of this? I started looking into the company. I dug through old records, tried to find connections, and checked their financials. It wasn't long before I hit a dead end. Every lead I followed led to more red tape, more cover-ups. But then, I found something that made me stop in my tracks. It was a list of names, people who had been connected to the outbreaks, either through medical research, corporate ties, or government involvement. And at the top of the list? The same name that kept popping up in the documents from the library, the Hidden Order. The more I looked, the more I realized that this wasn't just some isolated incident. The outbreaks were part of a much larger, coordinated effort. It wasn't just about controlling disease, It was about controlling populations. The more people who were affected, the more resources the elite had to control, the more they could manipulate global power. But there was something that unsettled me even more. These outbreaks seemed timed perfectly with major political events, like elections, wars, and trade negotiations. It was almost as if the hidden order was using these health crises to push their own agenda, controlling the outcome of world events one epidemic at a time. I couldn't keep this to myself. I knew I had to act, but who could I trust? There was no one to turn to for help. I had to figure out what was really happening, and why. Every connection I made led me to more questions. How deep did this conspiracy really go? And who was behind it all? I was on the edge of a discovery that could shake the world, and I could feel the danger closing in. But there was no turning back now. I had to go deeper. And as I pushed forward, I realized one terrifying truth: the more I uncovered, the more I became a target. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. The deeper I dug into the hidden order, the more dangerous my investigation became. I'd started as a journalist seeking the truth, but now I felt like I was walking on the edge of a razor blade. Every time I made a breakthrough, someone, or something, seemed to push me back. It wasn't just the conspiracy that was dangerous. It was the people who wanted to stop me from exposing it. I had learned that the hidden order wasn't just some rogue group of elites with a vague agenda. They were organized, influential, and had infiltrated governments, corporations, and even the medical community. The pharmaceutical company I'd been investigating was just a front. The real power was much deeper, lurking behind the scenes, pulling strings with cold precision. But the deeper I went, the more I realized I wasn't just up against a group of people with money and power. I was up against an entire system designed to keep secrets buried. I started receiving cryptic messages on my phone, strange phone calls, and suspicious emails. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. I was being watched. I was being hunted. I remember the night I first saw them. The people behind the curtain, the ones who didn't want the truth to come out. I had been following a lead, tracing the money behind a series of health-related mergers and acquisitions when I was followed. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but when the car started tailing me for miles, I knew something was wrong. I managed to lose them in a crowded part of the city, but not without getting a glimpse of their faces. They were calm, almost too calm, like they had done this before. It didn't take long to realize that these weren't ordinary henchmen. They were professionals, and they were working for someone, or something, much more powerful. The more I pieced together, the more I understood. The hidden order wasn't just about population control. It was about controlling everything. They had their fingers in every pie: politics, business, the media, healthcare, and even the most influential technological advances. The game they were playing wasn't just about money. It was about shaping the world to fit their vision. A world where they controlled not only the wealth but the minds of the people as well. They had engineered diseases, yes, but they had also infiltrated key industries, using technology to manipulate and monitor populations. I'd uncovered references to a massive surveillance system, codenamed Project Watchtower, that had been in development for years. This system could track and control every individual, predicting their behavior before they even made a move. At the heart of it all was the idea that the population was too large, too unruly to manage. They believed the world was at a tipping point, and unless drastic measures were taken, they would lose their grip. Population control wasn't just a method, it was the solution. If people could be controlled, manipulated, and reduced, the elites could reshape the world in their image. I had seen the face of this enemy, but what terrified me the most was that it wasn't just a shadowy group of individuals. It was an entire system, a global, far-reaching network that controlled the world's infrastructure, resources, and most frighteningly, the minds of the masses. I was just beginning to understand the scale of the conspiracy, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. These people had been pulling the strings for centuries. They were the ones who had made the rules, written the scripts for history, and ensured their control would never slip away. Now I had to make a decision. I could continue to dig deeper, risk my life, and face these shadowy forces head on, or I could turn back. But there was no turning back. I was already in too deep. The stakes had risen, and I had a choice to make: expose them, or become one of them. The decision was made. There was no backing out now. I had already seen enough to know that the truth was out there, buried deep beneath layers of lies and deception. I couldn't stop now, not when the world's future was at stake. If I could just get my hands on the right pieces of the puzzle, I might be able to bring it all to light. But I also knew the danger would escalate. I couldn't afford to be reckless. Every move had to be calculated, and every piece of information had to be safeguarded. The first thing I did was double down on my sources. I had a few trustworthy contacts left in the medical field, people who had worked on various research projects but had become disillusioned by the lack of transparency. I started reaching out to them, probing for any leaks, any information that could connect the dots between the outbreaks and the hidden elites. But even they were scared. They'd all heard whispers of a powerful group pulling the strings behind the scenes, but no one wanted to talk. Every time I asked the right questions, they'd clam up or make excuses. It was clear that they were afraid, not of me, but of the very people I was trying to expose. But I wasn't discouraged. I kept pushing, using old investigative techniques I'd learned over the years. I started digging into the old corporate records, reviewing the financial transactions that seemed just a little too clean. The hidden order was smart. They'd covered their tracks well, but no one was perfect. There had to be a gap somewhere, some overlooked detail that would lead me straight to them. Then, one night it happened. I was going through some archived documents, dusty old files that had been long forgotten, when I found something that made my heart skip a beat. It was a confidential report from one of the world's top pharmaceutical firms, but it wasn't just about a new drug or breakthrough in healthcare. This document detailed the development of Project Lazarus, a covert initiative that aimed to create a virus capable of targeting specific genetic markers in the population. A virus that could selectively target certain groups, not based on nationality or race, but on genetic predisposition. This was it. This was the smoking gun. The virus was part of a larger plan, a method of reducing global population through a scientific, almost surgical approach. The elites didn't want chaos or warfare to accomplish their goal. No, they wanted precision. And they had it. The deeper I went, the darker it got. I uncovered a network of seemingly benign organizations, think tanks, charities, and private health agencies. On the surface, they looked legitimate. But they all had one thing in common: they were linked to the same people. The names started to repeat, like a trail of breadcrumbs leading me to the heart of the conspiracy. One name kept appearing in the documents I reviewed: Dr. Evelyn Price. She was listed as the lead researcher for Project Lazarus, but her ties to the hidden order ran deeper than I could have imagined. She had worked with several powerful politicians, healthcare executives, and even military leaders, helping shape global health policies that perfectly aligned with the order's vision. Her role was key. She wasn't just a scientist, she was an architect of this dark plan. I knew that finding Dr. Price was critical. If I could get to her, if I could make her talk, I might just be able to expose the entire operation. But the closer I got to her, the more dangerous things became. I could feel it in my bones. Someone, or something, was watching me. Every time I made progress, something would happen. A flat tire. A strange phone call. A break-in at my apartment. It was as if they knew exactly what I was doing, and they were prepared to stop me at any cost. Still, I pushed on. I had come too far to back down now. My investigation was no longer just a job. It was a mission, a fight against a powerful system that had kept humanity in the dark for far too long. The truth was out there, and I was getting closer, closer to the edge of a discovery that could shatter everything. But I also knew this: the closer I got, the more the danger would escalate. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep running. I was exhausted. Every waking hour was consumed by the investigation. My thoughts, my energy, everything was focused on uncovering the truth. But the deeper I dug, the more I began to feel like I was drowning in a sea of information. Every discovery brought me closer to the truth, but it also opened up even more questions. I was chasing a ghost, and I was beginning to wonder if I would ever catch it. Then, one evening, as I sifted through yet another stack of documents, something caught my eye. It was a series of encrypted files, hidden deep within a chain of emails from one of the pharmaceutical companies connected to Project Lazarus. The name, Dr. Evelyn Price, appeared again, but this time, the files were different. They weren't just about drug development or healthcare initiatives. These files contained reports on human trials, real, documented experiments involving genetic manipulation and viral development. I quickly realized that this was far worse than I'd imagined. The documents detailed a project codenamed Elysium, an experimental viral outbreak created to test the genetic targeting capabilities of Project Lazarus. The virus was designed to selectively affect certain genetic markers, primarily those found in specific socioeconomic classes. The most chilling part? The virus wasn't just about population control. It was about altering the very genetic makeup of society. This was about shaping humanity itself, ensuring that the elites would remain in power while the rest of the world was engineered to be weaker, more controllable. I sat back in my chair stunned. This wasn't just a plan to reduce population. This was a plan to re-engineer the human race. The virus wasn't a random mutation. It was a deliberate tool, designed to reshape humanity according to the desires of the hidden order. A cold, calculated approach to create a new world order, one where they were in complete control, and the rest of the world was reduced to nothing more than a compliant, manageable population. But there was something else buried in those files that struck me even harder. A note from Dr. Price herself. It was a personal message, one she had written to someone high up in the hidden order. She referred to Elysium not as a project, but as a new dawn for humanity. She believed that the current world order was unsustainable, that humanity was on the brink of collapse, and that their intervention was necessary to reset civilization. Reading her words made my stomach churn. She wasn't just an architect of this plan, she was a true believer in it. She believed that they were saving the world by reshaping it in their image. And the most terrifying part? She wasn't alone. There were more people like her, all across the globe, working behind the scenes, pulling the strings. I had finally uncovered the first major revelation of the conspiracy. It was worse than I had imagined. The hidden order was not only manipulating world events, they were engineering humanity itself, planning to create a new, controlled society where only those who were genetically chosen would survive. But now I had a choice. I could expose this to the world, but would anyone believe me? The evidence was overwhelming, but so was the power of the people behind it. Would they stop at nothing to protect their secret? Would they eliminate me, just as they had eliminated anyone else who had tried to expose them? I was no longer just chasing a story. I was fighting for survival. The world didn't know what was coming, and I wasn't sure if I could stop it. The revelation of Elysium had sent shockwaves through my entire understanding of the world. The hidden order wasn't just controlling the global population, they were manipulating the very fabric of humanity, and they had the technology, the influence, and the resources to do it. The discovery of their true intentions was both terrifying and overwhelming. But it wasn't enough. I knew that exposing this first piece of the puzzle was just the beginning, not the end. There had to be more. There had to be a way to connect the dots and trace this network to its core. I had barely begun to scratch the surface. As the weeks passed, the investigation became more perilous. I had gone public with some of the initial findings, but it was clear that the hidden order had far-reaching arms. They were everywhere, their influence seeping into every corner of society. The more I dug, the more I realized just how deeply they had infiltrated. The first breakthrough came when I was digging through a series of internal emails from a subsidiary of the pharmaceutical conglomerate involved in Project Lazarus. It was in one of these emails that I found a strange reference to a meeting with someone named the Architect, a person with significant influence within the hidden order. The email was vague, but one thing stood out. The Architect's involvement in the upcoming Global Summit on Population Control will determine the next phase of our operations. Population control. It was the exact phrase I had been searching for. I began to dig deeper into the Global Summit on Population Control. It seemed like an innocuous event on the surface, a forum for global leaders to discuss sustainability and healthcare, focusing on how to manage the world's ever-growing population. But now I knew better. This wasn't just about policy discussions. It was about putting the next phase of the Hidden Order's plan into action. But what struck me was how carefully orchestrated the event was. The people involved were not your average diplomats or aid workers. These were the elite, the same figures I had encountered throughout my investigation. Government leaders, business tycoons, and even renowned academics, all with ties to the Hidden Order. The summit wasn't just a public event. It was a gathering to solidify their control and implement the next phase of their agenda. The virus was only one tool. There were other methods in the works, more insidious and far-reaching. I knew I had to get inside the summit. It was the key to everything. If I could attend, I would have access to all the high-level discussions, the plans, and the final stages of their scheme. But getting in wasn't going to be easy. The Hidden Order's grip was tightening, and they weren't about to let someone like me ruin their plans. I used every connection I had left. I reached out to contacts in the diplomatic world, finding an ally and an old acquaintance who worked for the UN. Through a series of covert exchanges, I managed to secure a fake invitation. I was going in, undercover, as part of the press. The summit itself was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. The venue was lavish, a massive complex hidden deep in the mountains, far from prying eyes. The discussions were filled with vague promises of sustainability and innovation, but beneath the surface, the real conversation was about control. They spoke of new technologies, mass data collection, and advanced AI systems to monitor populations. And at the center of it all was a plan to implement Project Lazarus on a global scale. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They weren't just planning to release the virus anymore. They were preparing to use the data collected from their AI surveillance systems to manage entire populations, determining who lived, who worked, and who would be eliminated. The virus was just one part of the equation. It was the catalyst for the larger transformation they had been plotting for years. It was terrifying to see it all laid out in front of me, the control, the manipulation, the sheer coldness of their plans. But as I sat in that room, listening to them discuss how they would reshape humanity, a voice inside my head screamed at me to act. They were talking about billions of lives, about rewriting the future of the human race, and I was the only one who had the power to expose them. But I knew that the deeper I got, the more dangerous it would become. The Hidden Order's web of influence was vast. Their control over governments, corporations, and even the media made it nearly impossible for anyone to speak out. Every step I took closer to the truth seemed to bring me one step closer to being silenced. Still, I couldn't stop now. The layers of the conspiracy were unfolding, and I was getting closer to the heart of it all. But at what cost? How much longer could I stay one step ahead of them? I had always believed that in moments like this, in the midst of chaos and danger, there were certain people you could rely on. In my mind, the world of secrets and conspiracies could be navigated only with a few trusted allies, and I thought I had one in Jake, a fellow journalist I had worked with for years. He was my sounding board, the one person who knew the full extent of what I had uncovered about the Hidden Order. But that trust, that belief, was shattered the night I realized that Jake wasn't just an ally, he was a liability. I had been gathering intel on the summit for days, meticulously compiling all the information I had, and slowly starting to piece together the last critical elements of the conspiracy. I had tracked down the true mastermind behind the summit, the architect, and I had finally managed to learn their true identity. The next step was to get the name out, to expose them to the world. But I needed Jake's help. I needed him to push the story out to the media. I called him, hoping for that same support he had always given me. But the conversation didn't go as I expected. "Alex," he said, his voice low, almost as if he were trying to hide something. "I've been thinking about all this, about the dangers. We've dug too deep. If we expose them now, it'll be over for both of us." "Jake, you're not seriously saying we back down now?" I replied, incredulous. "We can stop this. We have the proof, we have everything we need." But Jake's response sent a chill down my spine. "There's more at play here than you realize. The hidden order isn't the only game in town. You don't know who you're really dealing with. We can't win this fight, Alex. It's bigger than both of us. You have no idea what they're capable of." For a moment, I thought I misunderstood him. But then, as the words hung in the air, it hit me. Jake wasn't just afraid. He wasn't just trying to protect me. He was trying to protect himself. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you with this," Jake continued. "I've already made my choice. And you need to make yours. Don't go any further." My heart sank. I had always known that Jake had a little more ambition than he let on, but I never imagined he would turn on me like this. I realized then that his ties to the hidden order ran deeper than I'd ever known. He was one of them, or at the very least, he had decided to play ball with them. The phone call ended abruptly, and I sat there, stunned. The betrayal was like a punch to the gut. Everything I had believed about Jake, our friendship, our shared ideals, had been a lie. I had never been so angry in my life. And yet a part of me felt a strange sense of relief. I had always suspected that there were forces more powerful than we understood, but now, I knew for sure. The hidden order had agents everywhere, even in the places where you thought you were safe. I couldn't afford to let Jake's betrayal stop me. If anything, it made me more determined than ever to bring the truth to light. But I also knew that I couldn't trust anyone anymore. My world had just become a lot smaller. The only person I could rely on was myself. The next few days were a blur. I tried to contact other journalists, hoping someone would pick up the thread of my story, but I knew it was pointless. The media was controlled, just like everything else. Jake had made sure of that. I had to finish this alone. I was now fully aware of the risks, but I also knew that the more I uncovered, the more dangerous my situation would become. Jake's betrayal was a wake-up call. It was clear now that I wasn't just fighting against the conspiracy. I was up against a network that could turn anyone into an enemy. And the further I went, the fewer allies I would have. I had always believed that in moments like this, in the midst of chaos and danger, there were certain people you could rely on. In my mind, the world of secrets and conspiracies could be navigated only with a few trusted allies, and I thought I had one in Jake, a fellow journalist I had worked with for years. He was my sounding board, the one person who knew the full extent of what I had uncovered about the hidden order. But that trust, that belief, was shattered the night I realized that Jake wasn't just an ally, he was a liability. I had been gathering intel on the summit for days, meticulously compiling all the information I had, and slowly starting to piece together the last critical elements of the conspiracy. I had tracked down the true mastermind behind the summit, the architect, and I had finally managed to learn their true identity. The next step was to get the name out, to expose them to the world. But I needed Jake's help. I needed him to push the story out to the media. I called him, hoping for that same support he had always given me. But the conversation didn't go as I expected. "Alex," he said, his voice low, almost as if he were trying to hide something. "I've been thinking about all this, about the dangers. We've dug too deep. If we expose them now, it'll be over for both of us." "Jake, you're not seriously saying we back down now?" I replied, incredulous. "We can stop this. We have the proof, we have everything we need." But Jake's response sent a chill down my spine. "There's more at play here than you realize. The Hidden Order isn't the only game in town. You don't know who you're really dealing with. We can't win this fight, Alex. It's bigger than both of us. You have no idea what they're capable of." For a moment, I thought I misunderstood him. But then, as the words hung in the air, it hit me. Jake wasn't just afraid. He wasn't just trying to protect me. He was trying to protect himself. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you with this," Jake continued. "I've already made my choice. And you need to make yours. Don't go any further." My heart sank. I had always known that Jake had a little more ambition than he let on, but I never imagined he would turn on me like this. I realized then that his ties to the Hidden Order ran deeper than I'd ever known. He was one of them, or at the very least, he had decided to play ball with them. The phone call ended abruptly, and I sat there, stunned. The betrayal was like a punch to the gut. Everything I had believed about Jake, our friendship, our shared ideals, had been a lie. I had never been so angry in my life. And yet a part of me felt a strange sense of relief. I had always suspected that there were forces more powerful than we understood, but now, I knew for sure. The Hidden Order had agents everywhere, even in the places where you thought you were safe. I couldn't afford to let Jake's betrayal stop me. If anything, it made me more determined than ever to bring the truth to light. But I also knew that I couldn't trust anyone anymore. My world had just become a lot smaller. The only person I could rely on was myself. The next few days were a blur. I tried to contact other journalists, hoping someone would pick up the thread of my story, but I knew it was pointless. The media was controlled, just like everything else. Jake had made sure of that. I had to finish this alone. I was now fully aware of the risks, but I also knew that the more I uncovered, the more dangerous my situation would become. Jake's betrayal was a wake-up call. It was clear now that I wasn't just fighting against a conspiracy. I was up against a network that could turn anyone into an enemy. And the further I went, the fewer allies I would have. Everything I had uncovered up until this point had been leading to this moment, the final push, the last chance to expose the Hidden Order for what it truly was. But I knew that with each passing hour, the danger grew. The more I dug, the more I realized that I was walking on the edge of a knife. One misstep, one wrong move, and everything I had fought for would vanish. The more I learned, the more I felt like a puppet tangled in strings I could no longer control. The Hidden Order had known about me long before I ever stumbled upon their secrets. They had allowed me to find the clues, to piece together the puzzle, knowing all along that I would get to this point. Why? Because they wanted me to make a choice. The choice that would either lead to my destruction, or their victory. But I wasn't going to let them control the narrative. I had come too far to back down now. I had the evidence, the leaked documents, the recordings, the witness testimonies, everything I needed to expose them. I had seen the global network they controlled, from pharmaceutical giants to media monopolies, from political figures to corporate moguls. The Hidden Order's reach was vast, and they had carefully cultivated a world where the elite reigned supreme, and the masses were nothing more than pawns in their game. I was about to tear all of that down. But first, I needed to confront the last piece of the puzzle. The architect. The person who had been pulling the strings all along, the mastermind behind the summit, behind the virus, behind Project Lazarus, and behind the manipulation of entire populations. I had tracked down their location, a hidden mansion tucked away in the hills outside the city. It was isolated, fortified, and well guarded, but I knew that if I was going to get the answers I needed, this was where I had to go. The night I made my way to the mansion, everything felt different. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I was prepared to do whatever it took. I wasn't just going there to confront the architect. I was going there to end this once and for all. If I could expose them, if I could finally put a name to the force that had been controlling the world for so long, I could stop them. I had no illusions about what was at stake. This wasn't just about uncovering a conspiracy anymore. This was about saving humanity from a future where the elite controlled every aspect of our lives. The future they had planned for us. The future they were already building. I slipped into the mansion under the cover of darkness, my mind racing with questions. Who was the architect? Who were they really, and what was their ultimate goal? I had seen glimpses of their plans, but I knew that this confrontation would be the key to understanding it all. As I crept through the mansion's halls, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was like the walls themselves were alive, waiting to trap me. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow seemed to move with purpose. But I had come too far to turn back now. I found the room at the heart of the mansion, a large office with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the hills. There, sitting behind a massive desk, was the architect. Their face was partially obscured by the dim light, but I could make out their sharp features, their calculating gaze. "Alex," they said, their voice calm and measured, as if they had been expecting me. "I knew you would come. You've been digging for the truth, haven't you? But you've only scratched the surface." I stood there, frozen for a moment, trying to process the reality of what was happening. I had finally found them. The person who had been orchestrating everything. "I know everything," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and fear. "I know about the virus, I know about Project Lazarus, and I know about your plans to reshape humanity. This ends tonight." The architect chuckled softly, standing up from behind the desk. "You think you can stop this? You think you can undo everything we've built?" They walked slowly around the desk, their eyes never leaving mine. "You are a part of this. You always have been. You come from the same bloodline, the same legacy. You're one of us." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The same bloodline. The same legacy. I had always known there was something off about my family's past, but this was more than I had ever imagined. "You're wrong," I spat. "I'm nothing like you. And I will expose you for what you are. You can't control the truth forever." The architect smiled, a cold, chilling smile. "You're already too late. The systems are in place, the plan is set in motion. The world will never be the same. And you'll be forgotten. Just another footnote in history." In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about a conspiracy anymore. It was about the future of humanity, and whether I could expose the truth before it was too late. I had to act, and I had to act fast. With everything I had uncovered, I knew there was only one way out. I had to expose the architect, their plans, and the hidden order once and for all. There was no turning back. The final countdown had begun. The final confrontation with the architect felt surreal, like a scene from a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. As they circled around me, their smug confidence was a stark contrast to the storm of emotions racing through my mind. The weight of everything I had learned, the centuries of manipulation, the destruction of entire populations, the rewriting of humanity's future, hung heavily on my shoulders. I was standing at the precipice of exposing it all, but the truth came with a price. The architect seemed to sense the fear in my eyes, the uncertainty I tried so hard to suppress. They stepped closer, their voice smooth and calculated. "You don't understand, do you?" they asked, almost pitying. "The world we've created isn't one of evil. It's one of necessity. We're saving humanity from itself. You see, the population is growing too fast. Resources are dwindling. Chaos is inevitable. You can't stop progress. You can't stop what's coming. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, every word they spoke wrapping itself around my brain. They were right about one thing: they truly believed they were saving humanity. But what they didn't realize was that in trying to save humanity, they were sacrificing everything that made it worth saving. I'm not here to listen to your twisted justifications, I said, my voice steadying as the truth came rushing back. You think you can control the future. You think you can control life itself. But the truth always finds a way out. The architect tilted their head, as if amused. You're just one person, Alex. One journalist. Do you really think you can change anything? You think the truth will matter when all the systems we've built are already in place? I felt a surge of determination. I wasn't just some random journalist. I was the one who had uncovered the layers, who had risked everything to expose their lies. I wasn't going to let them twist this reality. They thought they were untouchable, but I had the evidence, the recordings, the documents, the connections that linked them to every major event of the last century. With every fiber of my being, I knew that if I exposed this to the world, they couldn't suppress it. It would be too big to bury, too real to deny. The weight of my bloodline and their twisted manipulation had to be erased. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for the future of humanity. Let's see how long your world lasts when the truth is out, I said, turning to leave the room. But as I reached the door, a sound stopped me cold, the click of a gun being cocked. I froze. The architect stood at the desk, an expression of cold, calculated control on their face. You're not leaving here, Alex, they said, their tone harsh. Not with that information. You think anyone will listen to you? Do you think the world will care when we wipe you off the map? The elite are too powerful to be exposed. The gun was pointed directly at me, the weight of its presence crushing my chest. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had come this far, and I wasn't going to let fear dictate the end of this story. With a defiant smirk, I took out the last piece of evidence, a flash drive containing everything, the documents, the testimonies, the recordings of the architect's own admissions. I shoved it into my pocket, not giving a second glance to the gun. You're wrong, I said, my voice firm. The truth will set us free. I've already sent it to multiple media outlets. It's too late to stop it now. The architect's face twisted with rage, but before they could react, I made a run for it, slamming the door behind me. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I had no time to think, no time to plan. I had to get out. The world had to know the truth, and there was no way I was letting them take that from me. I ran through the mansion's darkened halls, my breath coming in quick gasps, my heart racing with adrenaline. I had to make it to the outside. I had to get to safety. As I burst through the back door and into the night, I could hear the sounds of footsteps and shouts behind me. But I didn't look back. The flash drive in my pocket felt like the weight of the world. It contained everything, the end of the hidden order, the end of their manipulation, and the beginning of humanity's chance at freedom. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if the world was ready for the truth. But I had done it. I had exposed them. I had brought their empire to its knees. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly won. I never expected to find myself here, deep beneath the Mediterranean, facing the eerie remains of a civilization that should have been lost forever. I've dedicated my life to archaeology, uncovering fragments of the past that once held significance, but never had I stumbled upon something like this. My name is Dr. Olivia Carter, and today, my team and I were about to uncover a discovery that would change the course of history. The day started like any other. A small team of experts, me included, set out to explore what was rumored to be an ancient city submerged off the coast. It had been my dream to investigate this area, after years of studying myths and legends about Atlantis. the mysterious lost city that, according to ancient texts, was said to possess knowledge far ahead of its time. We thought we were just going to examine some ruins, maybe take some artifacts back to the lab for analysis, and call it a day. But what we found beneath the waves was anything but ordinary. The moment I dove into the water, I knew something was different. The clarity of the ocean seemed unnaturally perfect, and beneath me lay the remnants of towering structures, dormant and yet pulsing with an energy I couldn't explain. Stone walls, perfectly carved with inscriptions in an unknown script, lined the path. And then I saw it, what I can only describe as a machine of sorts. It was encrusted in coral and seaweed, but its shape was unmistakable, sleek, angular, and unlike anything from the time it was purported to be from. It was clear to me that this wasn't just an ancient city. This was a city with advanced technology, far more advanced than anything we knew of in human history. The discovery shook me to my core. I couldn't just walk away from this. I called the team, telling them to gather around. We were standing on the threshold of a breakthrough, something far more significant than any of us had anticipated. We made the decision to stay longer and explore the site, and that's when things began to feel wrong. It was as if the city itself was alive, watching us. I could feel an unease crawling up my spine every time I gazed at the strange machine. It wasn't just its design that unsettled me. It was the fact that it shouldn't exist. In the coming days, we began to catalog everything we found, taking care to photograph every inch of the ruins, but deep down, I knew this wasn't just an archaeological dig anymore. Something was off, and I was about to find out just how far-reaching this discovery would be. What we had uncovered wasn't merely a forgotten civilization, it was a message from the past, and the more I dug, the more I realized there were forces out there who wanted this secret to stay buried. And they would stop at nothing to ensure it remained that way. But I wasn't about to turn back. I had spent my life searching for the truth, and I wasn't about to let anyone, or anything, keep me from it. The discovery had rattled me in ways I hadn't fully grasped at first. There we were, standing on the edge of a historical precipice, staring at the ruins of a civilization that shouldn't exist, at least not in the form we found it. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had stumbled into something far bigger than I could have ever imagined. It started with a small, inconspicuous artifact, nothing more than a stone tablet, chipped and worn by centuries of salt water and sediment. At first, we assumed it was just another relic, perhaps something mundane that had survived the test of time. But as I wiped away the layers of grime, I noticed symbols etched into the stone. These weren't typical inscriptions. The script was unlike anything we had ever seen. It was a hybrid of languages, ancient and modern, with a structure that suggested a deeper understanding of mathematics and technology, far beyond what ancient civilizations could have known. I held the tablet up to the light, trying to make sense of the carvings. My mind raced. This was no ordinary artifact. This was a key to something much bigger. The engravings seemed to form a pattern, one that hinted at advanced technological principles, energy sources that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The designs appeared to show diagrams of energy flow, reminiscent of modern electrical circuits, but they were thousands of years old. I couldn't ignore it. I felt the weight of it, this tiny tablet, and the immense knowledge it promised. This wasn't just an ancient city. It was a time capsule, a record of a society that had mastered forces we had barely begun to understand. We couldn't wait to decode it, but we were cautious. My team, usually eager and enthusiastic, sensed the gravity of what we were about to unearth. We knew this wasn't something to be treated lightly. I immediately called for a digital analysis of the stone, hoping that a high-powered microscope and a scanner might provide clearer insight. But as I left the chamber to arrange for the necessary equipment, I couldn't help but feel a gnawing sensation in my gut, like something was watching us, something waiting for us to make a mistake. When I returned, the atmosphere had shifted. The artifact was gone. I stood frozen, staring at the empty table where the tablet had been placed. A cold sweat ran down my back as I looked around. "Where is it?" I demanded. My team stared at me, confusion and worry clouding their faces. "We didn't move it," said Jason, one of the junior archaeologists. "It was right here when you left." A chill ran through me. Someone had been here, someone who didn't want us to uncover this. And then, the first real clue came in the form of an anonymous message. It was delivered to my inbox late that night, no subject line, just a single phrase. "The Guardians are watching. Stop digging." The sender's identity was masked, but the message was clear. Someone knew what we were doing, and they didn't want us to proceed. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Who were the Guardians? And why were they so invested in preventing us from learning the truth? The mystery deepened, and as I sat there in the silence of my quarters, I realized that this wasn't just an academic pursuit anymore. We had uncovered something dangerous. Powerful forces we couldn't even begin to comprehend, were at play. I had been warned, but I couldn't back down now. The truth was out there, and I wasn't about to stop until I found it. I hadn't fully processed the gravity of the message when I received a phone call the next morning. It was from an unfamiliar number, but the voice on the other end was unmistakably authoritative. "Dr. Carter," the voice said, its tone clipped and stern. "We know what you found. You need to stop what you're doing. Immediately." I froze, gripping the phone tightly. My pulse quickened as the words sank in. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to mask the fear creeping into my voice. "I'm someone who knows what you're about to unleash. If you care about your safety, or the safety of your team, you'll abandon this dig right now." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there, staring at the phone, my mind racing. Who was this? And why were they so desperate to stop us? For the first time, I felt the weight of what we had discovered. We were no longer just archaeologists digging up artifacts. We were now players in something much bigger, a game that was centuries old. Later that day, I received an unexpected visitor. The man who arrived at the site was tall, sharply dressed, and exuded an air of cold authority. He introduced himself as Agent Henson, a government official. But there was something off about him, something that didn't sit right. His presence was intimidating, and his questions were probing, almost as if he already knew everything we had uncovered. "You're digging up something that was meant to stay buried," he told me, his gaze unwavering. "The technology you've found is not for your kind to understand, let alone control. You need to cease this investigation before it's too late." I was taken aback. "Who are you to tell me what I can or can't do? This is a scientific discovery, and I have the right to explore it." He didn't flinch. "You don't understand the forces you're dealing with. There are people, powerful people, who have been watching over this site for decades. The knowledge you're uncovering was never meant to see the light of day. It's not just history, it's a weapon, and there are consequences for disturbing it." I felt a cold knot settle in my stomach. I didn't believe in threats, but there was something about his certainty that made me doubt my initial excitement. As Agent Henson left, he handed me a business card with no contact information, only the name, the Guardians of Order. The card felt like a subtle warning, a veiled threat wrapped in mystery. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every creak of the building, every whisper of the wind, seemed amplified. There was no denying it anymore. There were forces out there that wanted this discovery buried. But who were the Guardians? And why did they care so much about a lost city that had been hidden underwater for thousands of years? The next morning, I gathered my team together to discuss our options. I couldn't ignore the danger we were in, but I also couldn't walk away now. We had uncovered something monumental, something that could change everything we knew about human history and technology. I knew the risks, but I also knew that if we didn't pursue this, someone else would. And I wasn't about to let the truth be buried again, not without a fight. As we continued our investigation, I realized that we weren't just uncovering the ruins of Atlantis. We were uncovering a global conspiracy, one that had been carefully orchestrated over centuries, with one clear goal: to control the knowledge that Atlantis had left behind. I couldn't get Agent Henson's words out of my mind. "The technology you've found is not for your kind to understand, let alone control." His warning echoed in my thoughts as we pushed forward with the investigation. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized that the Atlantis we had uncovered was not just an archaeological site. It was a portal to something much more dangerous. Something I had only begun to understand. The encrypted tablet had been our first breakthrough. Now, it was time to dive deeper. With the help of Dr. Miller, our resident linguist, we worked around the clock to decipher the symbols and patterns. At first, it was slow going. The symbols were unlike anything we had seen, blending ancient scripts from different cultures, almost as if they were intentionally designed to obscure meaning. But after days of painstaking analysis, we uncovered a hidden message. The message seemed to describe an energy source that harnessed the power of the earth itself, something that could provide limitless energy. But there was something else embedded within the text, something more sinister. It hinted at the ability to manipulate human minds, to control thoughts and emotions. It was clear now that Atlantis had not only mastered energy generation, they had discovered ways to manipulate human consciousness. As I read through the documents, a chill settled in my chest. The ancient Atlanteans had created a technology capable of changing the global power structure. They had the means to control nations, populations, and perhaps even the world itself. But what frightened me the most wasn't the power of the technology. It was the fact that someone, or something, had been guarding it. The Guardians of Order were not just trying to protect ancient knowledge, they were trying to protect the power that came with it. And the more I learned, the more I realized that their influence stretched far beyond this dig site. This wasn't just about keeping a secret. This was about maintaining control over the world itself. To understand what we were truly up against, I needed to dig deeper. I reached out to contacts in the intelligence community, archaeologists who had worked on similar digs, former agents who had dealt with secret societies, and historians who had studied the connections between Atlantis and the ancient world. Each conversation led to more questions than answers, and the pieces of the puzzle seemed to grow more elusive. One night, as I sifted through old records in the archives, I came across a name, Aurelia van Dyck. She was a scholar who had mysteriously disappeared years ago while researching the same ruins we were studying. Her last known correspondence was a letter, which I immediately pulled up. In it, she referenced something called the Nexus Protocol, a secret project linked to the technology of Atlantis. The project, according to Aurelia, was being studied by a group that sought to unlock the power of the Atlantis machine, a group that had ties to high-ranking global elites. The more I read, the clearer it became. The Guardians of Order were not just a fringe group. They were connected to powerful institutions, governments, multinational corporations, and secret organizations that had been working for centuries to control the knowledge of Atlantis. They weren't just trying to hide the truth. They were actively using it to shape the world in their image. My mind raced. We had been so focused on uncovering the physical remains of Atlantis, we hadn't realized how deeply the influence of this lost civilization had permeated our own world. The conspiracy I had stumbled upon was not just about ancient history. It was a living, breathing force that had been quietly shaping our reality. I knew I had to get to the bottom of this. But as I shared my findings with the team, I could feel the tension rising. Some were excited, eager to continue. Others were scared, their faces pale as they realized the magnitude of what we were dealing with. Everyone knew we were on the edge of something that could change everything. But we couldn't back down now. The truth was too important. And as I looked at the faces of my team, I realized that we weren't just fighting for knowledge. We were fighting for the future of humanity itself. The tension among the team was palpable. As we dug deeper into the encrypted texts and pieced together the hidden clues, something in the air shifted. We were getting closer to something enormous. Every discovery felt like a brushstroke on a canvas too large to comprehend. The ruins of Atlantis weren't just a lost city, they were a hidden archive of ancient technology, far beyond anything we had ever imagined. I remember the day we made the first major breakthrough like it was yesterday. It was late, around midnight, and I was alone in the lab, going over the data when I saw it, a hidden diagram embedded in the stone tablet's carvings. I had glanced at it before, but it didn't make sense. The symbols were too abstract. But now, with everything we had uncovered, I saw it clearly. The diagram wasn't just a map of an energy source. It was a schematic, detailing how to tap into the Earth's core and harness its raw energy. I immediately called the team to come in. They needed to see this. When they arrived, I showed them the diagram, and we all stood in silence. The implications were staggering. The energy source the Atlanteans had discovered wasn't just a power plant or a battery. It was something that could change the course of civilization. It described a method of generating energy that didn't rely on fossil fuels, nuclear power, or even the modern electrical grid. This was something more fundamental. It was a pure, unlimited energy source that, if harnessed correctly, could replace every other form of energy known to mankind. But there was more. As we examined the diagram further, we realized that this wasn't just about power. The blueprint hinted at something else, a control mechanism. The design wasn't just a way to generate energy, it was a way to control it. It was clear now that the Atlanteans had developed a technology that could manipulate the physical world itself, altering everything from weather patterns to human consciousness. I felt a chill run down my spine as the realization hit me. This was the ultimate weapon. The ability to control the environment, to control people's thoughts, to reshape entire societies. The ramifications of this technology were far beyond anything we were prepared for. We had to tell the world, I thought. This was the discovery of a lifetime, and the public needed to know. But as soon as the thought crossed my mind, I was struck with a sudden, overwhelming fear. Who would control this technology if it was released? Would it be used for good, or would it fall into the hands of those who would use it for power and control? That's when I heard it, a faint knock on the door. I turned to see Agent Henson standing in the doorway. He hadn't called ahead. He just appeared, like a shadow slipping into the light. "I told you to stop," he said calmly. "But you didn't listen. Now, the consequences will be severe." His words hung in the air, heavy with threat. But it wasn't just the warning that unsettled me. It was the look in his eyes, like he already knew what we had uncovered. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he continued. "This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us. And now, there's no going back." I didn't respond immediately. I couldn't. I was too busy processing what we had just uncovered, the power, the control, the implications of this discovery. But I knew one thing for certain: we couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. Whatever Henson's group was, whatever the Guardians of Order were, they were right about one thing: the world wasn't ready for this knowledge. And neither were we. For the first time since we began this journey, I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. We had discovered something that could change the course of humanity. And now, we had to decide whether to expose it to the world or bury it again, like the Atlanteans had done centuries ago. But there was no turning back now. The truth had been uncovered, and the world would have to face it, whether it was ready or not. The deeper we delved into the artifacts, the more we uncovered about the hidden history surrounding Atlantis. The energy schematic was only the tip of the iceberg. Every stone we turned revealed new layers of complexity, suggesting that Atlantis wasn't just a civilization, it was a focal point for an underground network of ancient elites. I was studying an old map, one of the first pieces we had uncovered in the ruins, when I noticed something strange. At first, it seemed like a mere decorative pattern, but then it struck me. There were markings on the map that weren't geographical. They were aligned with a series of ancient power centers around the world. These centers corresponded to places of strategic importance, locations where the Atlanteans had somehow influenced the world's earliest civilizations. The ancient Egyptians, the Mayans, the Sumerians, all had been influenced by a mysterious force. And at the center of it all was Atlantis. It was like the Atlanteans had laid the groundwork for a secret society, a global network that extended far beyond their time. It was clear now. The knowledge of Atlantis had been passed down through the ages, hidden by those in power to control humanity's destiny. And the Guardians of Order were part of this network. They had been watching, waiting for someone like me to uncover the truth. But the discovery wasn't all intellectual. There was a personal cost to what we were uncovering. As I pieced together the history, I began to notice familiar names, ones I had seen in Aurelia Van Dyke's journal, the same scholar who had mysteriously disappeared years ago. Her work had been suppressed by those who wanted to keep the secrets of Atlantis hidden, and it became clear to me that someone wanted to silence me as well. I felt a creeping paranoia set in. No longer was this just about archaeology or history, it was about survival. Every move we made seemed to attract unwanted attention, and we were growing increasingly isolated. My team was beginning to fracture, some members openly questioning the risks we were taking. The stakes were higher now, and as the puzzle pieces fell into place, I realized just how powerful the conspiracy we had uncovered really was. By now, we had made enough discoveries to know that the technology of Atlantis was far beyond anything we could fully understand. But we also knew that we weren't the only ones looking for it. The Guardians of Order weren't a small, secretive faction anymore. They were a shadow organization with roots in the world's most influential institutions. Governments, financial giants, and military powers had been using the knowledge of Atlantis to gain and maintain control over the global power structure. The more I dug, the more I realized just how deep the rabbit hole went. I had been approached by people offering me protection in exchange for silence, while others had tried to bribe me with promises of unimaginable wealth and influence. It was clear now, this wasn't just an academic pursuit. It was a battle for control over the future of humanity. And my team was right in the middle of it. One night, I returned to the site after a meeting with an old contact who had promised to help us. But when I arrived, everything was different. The doors were wide open, the lights flickering in the dark. The site was abandoned. I called out, but there was no answer. As I stepped inside, I saw the first signs of betrayal. Files, papers, and evidence had been scattered across the room, as if someone had been searching for something. The only thing missing was the one thing we had been working toward, the last of the Atlantean texts. Someone had taken it. Someone close to us. I felt a deep sense of betrayal wash over me as I realized what had happened. One of my own team members had sold us out. They had been working for the Guardians all along, feeding them information about our discoveries. The sense of isolation was overwhelming. We were now on our own, hunted by those who would stop at nothing to silence us. In the aftermath of the betrayal, I turned my attention to Aurelia Van Dyke's notes. Her last journal entry, a hastily written message, gave us a lead. She had been close to uncovering the final piece of the Atlantis puzzle, the Nexus Protocol. According to her, this was the key to unlocking the full potential of the Atlantean technology, and it could alter the course of human civilization. But the Nexus Protocol was not just a piece of technology. It was a program, a system that could interface directly with human consciousness, amplifying thoughts, controlling emotions, and influencing decisions on a global scale. Aurelia had discovered that the Guardians weren't just a secret society. They were the keepers of this power, using it to shape global events, manipulate leaders, and control entire populations. But Aurelia had failed to crack the code of the Nexus Protocol before she disappeared. Determined not to make the same mistake, I worked tirelessly to decode the remaining fragments of her research. Late one night, the breakthrough came. We had finally uncovered the final key to the Nexus Protocol, a sequence of symbols that, when combined, activated the ancient technology hidden beneath Atlantis. The system was far more advanced than we had imagined, capable of influencing the minds of millions, if not billions. But unlocking the Nexus Protocol came at a cost. With it, we now had the power to change the world, but so did the Guardians. The moment we activated it, we would become targets. Our only option was to destroy it, before the Guardians could use it against us. The decision was made. We had to destroy the Nexus Protocol, or it would fall into the wrong hands. But destroying it wouldn't be easy. We knew the Guardians were coming for us, and every second counted. As we raced against time, I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. The technology we had uncovered was powerful enough to reshape humanity, but it could also be used to control it completely. With the Guardians closing in, I faced an agonizing choice, whether to use the power of Atlantis to fight back or to sacrifice everything for the greater good. The pressure was unbearable. But in the end, I knew what needed to be done. We couldn't let this technology fall into anyone's hands, not even our own. As we made our final move to destroy the Nexus Protocol, the room erupted in chaos. The Guardians had found us. The last battle was fought in the very heart of Atlantis, the place where it all began. It was a fight for survival, a fight to prevent the world from being reshaped by the very forces we had uncovered. In the end, we succeeded in destroying the technology, but at a great cost. The secret of Atlantis, and its power, was lost once more. But the question remained, had we truly erased the threat, or had we only delayed the inevitable? The air was thick with tension as I stood at the heart of Atlantis, surrounded by the remnants of a civilization that had once wielded unimaginable power. The ancient technology lay before me. Its potential to change the world, to reshape history, was within my grasp. But with every passing moment, I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The Guardians were closing in, and the countdown to either destroy the Nexus Protocol or see it fall into the wrong hands was ticking away. The chamber we were in was unlike anything I had ever seen. The walls were lined with inscriptions, symbols that pulsed with a strange, otherworldly energy. The machine at the center of the room hummed with life, as if it had been waiting for this moment for millennia. And there it was, the final piece, the Nexus Protocol, a key to unlock a power that could control not just energy but the very minds of the people it touched. Olivia. I turned to face Jason, one of my most trusted team members. His face was pale, his hands shaking. If we do this, there's no going back. We'll never be able to control it. I nodded grimly. I know. But we have to destroy it. The world isn't ready for this power. No one is. If we let the Guardians take it, they'll use it to enslave humanity. We can't allow that. Jason didn't argue. We both understood the stakes. But even as I prepared to destroy the Nexus Protocol, a chilling thought crossed my mind. Had we truly made the right decision? What if there was a way to use this power for good? What if we could stop global manipulation without destroying the technology? But as the sound of footsteps echoed through the chamber, I realized there was no time for second thoughts. The Guardians had arrived. Agent Henson, flanked by several armed men, stepped into the room. He looked at me with cold, calculating eyes, as if this entire situation had been inevitable. You don't understand, Olivia, he said, his voice steady. This technology is the future. It's not about control, it's about shaping a better world. A world where conflict, poverty, and war are things of the past. We can use it to create peace. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Peace? By controlling everyone's minds? That's not peace, that's slavery. He didn't flinch. You think the world is ready to make the hard choices on its own? People need guidance. And the Guardians have been doing just that for centuries. I could see the resolve in his eyes, the unwavering belief that they were doing the right thing. But it wasn't right. We had discovered something that had the potential to be used for both good and evil. The difference was in who controlled it. "Olivia, please," Henson said, his voice softening slightly. "You're one of the few who understands what this could mean. You could join us. Help us bring about a new era of peace." I shook my head. "I've seen what your peace looks like, and I won't be a part of it." With that, I made my move. I rushed toward the machine, fingers flying over the controls. But as I reached for the lever to destroy the Nexus protocol, I felt a sharp pain in my side. One of Henson's men had fired, and I stumbled, clutching my wound. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Not now. In those final moments, as the machine hummed louder and louder, I realized something. This was no longer about just stopping the Guardians. It was about humanity itself. We had the choice to shape the future, but it wasn't a choice to be made lightly. There was no easy answer, no simple path. With the last of my strength, I reached out and activated the fail-safe, triggering the destruction of the machine. A massive shockwave rippled through the chamber as the power core exploded, sending debris flying in every direction. The Nexus protocol was gone, destroyed, buried once again beneath the sands of time. I collapsed to the ground, blood pooling around me. My vision blurred as I heard Henson's voice in the distance, shouting for his men to retreat. The fight was over, but the cost had been high. When I awoke, I was no longer in Atlantis. I was back at the surface, surrounded by my remaining team. Jason was at my side, his face pale but relieved. He had managed to get me out in time. The others had been captured, but the Nexus protocol was gone. The Guardians, at least for now, had been thwarted. But even as I lay there, recovering from my wounds, I knew that this wasn't the end. The world had changed, whether we were ready or not. The secrets of Atlantis had been buried once more, but the truth would never be fully erased. The power to control the world was real, and somewhere, someone would always seek it out again. As I looked at the horizon, I couldn't help but wonder, had we truly done the right thing? Or had we merely delayed the inevitable? Only time would tell. I can still remember the first time I began questioning everything I thought I knew. I was a former CIA agent, just a regular guy trying to live a quiet life after years of covert operations and classified missions. For someone like me, stepping away from the chaos should have been the easiest thing in the world, but it wasn't. It was harder than I ever imagined. It all started one cold, rainy evening. I had just finished another dull day working at a security firm when I received an encrypted email, something I hadn't expected. The sender was anonymous, and the message was brief, but it set off a chain of events I couldn't have prepared for. The words were simple, but they shook me to my core. "The Watchers are real, and they've been among us for decades. They're not what you think they are." I clicked on the attached image without hesitation. It was grainy, like something out of an old film, but there was no mistaking the man in the picture. It was a prominent political figure, someone I'd worked with during my time in the agency. He was sitting in a sterile, dimly lit room, and the expression on his face was unnervingly calm. But that wasn't what stood out to me. It was the figure standing beside him, tall, pale, almost too perfect. His face didn't look quite right, like a mask that someone had put on but never really bothered to take off. Something about it made my skin crawl. I had worked with this man on countless operations, but I had never seen him in that setting before. The photo made no sense. It was as though it was trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to understand. I couldn't just ignore it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something was wrong, not just with this photo, but with everything I had ever known. The email pointed me to a safe house in a remote location. It was a simple setup, a location I'd never been to during my time with the agency, but somehow, I felt drawn to it. The shadows of my past seemed to be following me, pulling me towards something I couldn't explain. But my curiosity got the better of me. I was going in, even though every instinct screamed at me to turn around. Arriving at the safe house felt like stepping into another world. The air was thick with tension. I knew I wasn't supposed to be here. There was something unnatural about the place. The house was completely deserted, the silence deafening. I checked every room before heading downstairs to a small, locked room. Inside, I found old documents. Some were redacted, some were highlighted in neon yellow, but the most shocking part was the name I found scribbled in the margins of one of the papers: The Watchers. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't just being paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. I had stumbled upon something huge, something I couldn't just walk away from. But what were the Watchers? And why were they hidden from the public eye? It was clear to me now that the world was not as it seemed. There were forces at play, forces much bigger than I had ever imagined, and they were manipulating everything. The first seed of doubt was planted. It was the beginning of a journey I never signed up for, but there was no turning back now. If I was going to uncover the truth, I had to start somewhere. And the only place to begin was by digging deeper into the conspiracy that was unfolding right before my eyes. But little did I know, the answers I was about to find would lead me into a web of secrets and lies so intricate, I might never make it out alive. It's funny how the smallest things can trigger the unraveling of the biggest secrets. After that chilling discovery in the safe house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, like someone or something was always just one step ahead of me. I knew I was onto something, but the silence was oppressive. For days I tried to connect the dots, but the more I looked into it, the more I realized that I was in way over my head. That is, until the first clue dropped into my lap. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that starts out boring and ends with your world crashing down around you. I was sitting in my apartment, flipping through old CIA files, trying to piece together any connection between the Watchers and the people I used to work with. I'd scanned the same documents 100 times before, but this time something caught my eye. It was a name, Dr. Jonathan Hargrave. The name rang a bell, but I couldn't place it. I leaned forward, squinting at the page. The file mentioned him in connection to a top-secret government project from decades ago, something about alien biology research. It was buried deep within an old case file, a forgotten relic of a program that had been abruptly shut down. But the most important thing wasn't the project itself, it was the photograph of Dr. Hargrave included in the file. There, standing beside the doctor, was none other than the same political figure from the photograph I'd found in the safe house. The same one who had been in the sterile room, looking almost too perfect. Only this time, he was younger, standing on the steps of a government building. His eyes were cold, calculating, nothing like the image of a public servant. But it was his smile that sent a cold chill down my spine. It wasn't human. It was too controlled, too stiff. This was the first solid lead I'd gotten, something real, something undeniable. But it raised more questions than answers. Why was this photo hidden in such an obscure file? Why was a prominent politician linked to a failed alien research project from the 80s? The photo was the key, and I knew it. But the more I examined it, the more questions arose. I had to dig deeper, to find out what Hargrave's connection to the political figure, and to the Watchers, was. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just scratching the surface of something far darker. With no clear answers, I did what I'd always done when faced with a mystery. I went to the source. I tracked down a few old contacts, former agents who worked in classified operations. The first call was a dead end. No one had heard of Hargrave. But the second, a retired analyst, sounded like he might know something. He was cautious at first, hesitant to speak, but when I dropped Hargrave's name, he paused. "Hargrave, you're digging up something that's been buried for a reason," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Be careful. There are things out there you can't unsee." People who don't want you to know the truth. That was the moment I knew I was on the right track. But it also made me realize how dangerous this was going to be. Whoever, or whatever, the Watchers were, they weren't just a conspiracy. They were real, and they had been hiding in plain sight for decades. The more I learned, the less I understood, but there was no turning back. The clue had been planted. I had a name, a face, and a thread to pull on. Now, all I had to do was keep pulling, even if it meant risking everything. The deeper I got into this, the more I realized I was no longer just a passive observer. I was a target, someone who had unwittingly stepped into a battle that had been brewing for decades. The problem was, I had no idea who the enemy was, or even how far this conspiracy went. I thought I was just uncovering some alien secrets, but I was starting to see the cracks in the facade of the government itself. The first real inkling that I wasn't just dealing with rogue scientists or government officials came when I tried to track down Dr. Jonathan Hargrave. The man was a ghost. Every lead I followed seemed to evaporate the moment I got close. It was as though someone, or something, was erasing his existence from every record. His name was wiped clean from every archive, every government document. Even the few people who had worked with him were suddenly unreachable. But then, there was a breakthrough, an encrypted file I managed to crack. It came from an old database I had access to during my time at the CIA. The file contained communications between Hargrave and someone higher up in the food chain, a man named David Wolf. The name didn't ring any bells, but the title did, Director of Global Operations. The file mentioned Wolf in connection to the Watchers, referring to them as assets that had to be protected at all costs. But it wasn't just the Watchers being protected, it was something much bigger. There was mention of a covert faction within the government, a secret organization with a single, chilling goal, to ensure that humanity never learned the truth about the Watchers. It was clear now that the Watchers weren't just extraterrestrials. They were a part of a much larger scheme. But what was their purpose? And what was Wolf's role in all of this? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't just being hunted by a few shady agents. I was up against a powerful, organized faction within the highest echelons of the government itself. They had their hands in everything: global politics, finance, technology, and even military operations. It wasn't just about hiding alien life. They were manipulating the course of history, shaping the future of the human race, and they would do anything to protect their secret. As I pieced it together, I saw the big picture. The Watchers weren't working alone. They had infiltrated governments across the world, becoming advisors, leaders, and even heads of state. These assets were not just observing humanity, they were guiding its destiny. But to what end? What kind of world were they trying to build, and how were they planning to do it? I reached out to a former colleague, a tech expert who had once worked with me in intelligence. She was hesitant at first, but when I mentioned Wolf's name, her tone changed. She knew exactly who he was. Wolf wasn't just a high-ranking official. He was the leader of a secret cabal within the government. A faction that had been working with the Watchers for decades to control the world's future. "You're dealing with a group that's far more powerful than you realize," she warned. "Wolf's faction controls everything, from the media to the military. They've been orchestrating world events for years. The Watchers are just one piece of the puzzle." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The Watchers weren't just aliens living in secret. They were part of a grand plan, one that involved the rise of human-alien hybrids. They weren't just hiding among us. They were helping to shape the very fabric of our world. And now, they were preparing to unleash something far more dangerous, a new world order, one controlled by them. The more I dug, the more I realized that the conspiracy was far bigger than I ever thought. These hidden forces weren't just protecting a secret, they were preparing for something catastrophic. But what? And why was I the one who was suddenly in the middle of it? The walls were closing in. I had to act fast before I became just another pawn in their game. But the deeper I went, the more I realized that no matter how many pieces I uncovered, I was still missing something crucial. The ultimate question: what was the Watchers' true agenda? And how could I stop them before it was too late? The days blurred together as I continued to dig deeper into the conspiracy. What had started as a curiosity about the Watchers had now turned into an obsession. Every time I thought I was close to uncovering the truth, another layer of the puzzle emerged, more intricate and dangerous than the last. I wasn't just fighting to expose a secret anymore. I was fighting for my life. I had begun to track down old contacts, people who had worked in various government agencies, scientists, and military personnel. Most were too scared to talk. Some outright refused. A few claimed they knew nothing, but their nervous glances told me otherwise. The few who did speak, however, offered fragmented pieces of the larger picture. Every conversation brought a new piece to the puzzle, and with each new revelation, I felt the walls closing in tighter around me. One night, I got a tip about an underground facility, a research center located in a remote part of the country. The facility had been shut down years ago, but the files suggested it had been involved in experiments related to extraterrestrial biology and hybridization. This was the lead I'd been waiting for, the one that could confirm everything I'd been suspecting. I contacted an old acquaintance, Dr. Emily Carter, a former scientist with a background in biochemistry. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew she had worked at the facility when it was operational. When I reached her, I could tell something was wrong. Her voice trembled when she spoke, and she told me not to trust anyone. But she couldn't resist. She told me that the facility had been involved in secret experiments to create human-alien hybrids. The goal wasn't just to study the aliens, it was to replicate their biology. Some of these hybrids had been integrated into society already, hidden in plain sight, in positions of power. The hybrids, they're already here, she whispered over the phone. They've been placed strategically, not just in politics, but in key positions across industries. They're everywhere. The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. The hybrids weren't just some secret project. They were already among us, controlling the future of humanity. They were the puppeteers, pulling the strings of the world from the shadows. But why? What was their endgame? I spent the next few days trying to gather more information, following leads and meeting with former employees who had worked in the facility. I pieced together the story of the experiments, of how some hybrids had been successfully integrated into society, while others were kept hidden, kept in control. But the most shocking revelation came when one of the former scientists, a man named Mark Hargrove, offered me a shocking piece of evidence, an encrypted video recording that he had secretly kept from the government. The video showed a meeting between several high-ranking officials and a hybrid who appeared to be in charge of the entire operation. The meeting was held in a dark room, the faces of the officials obscured, but one thing was clear: the hybrid wasn't just participating in the meeting, he was leading it. And the discussion was about creating more hybrids, integrating them into global politics and military positions, preparing for the eventual takeover of human society. I was stunned. This wasn't just a conspiracy about aliens anymore. It was about control over humanity's future. The hybrids weren't just working with the government, they were orchestrating a new world order. The Watchers had infiltrated humanity to such an extent that they were now running the show. They were the ones in control, manipulating world events to serve their interests. I knew I had to expose this. But I also knew it wasn't going to be easy. Every step I took closer to the truth seemed to put me in more danger. I couldn't trust anyone, not the government, not the so-called whistleblowers, not even the people I once called colleagues. The conspiracy had spread so deep that there was no telling who was really working for the Watchers and who was just caught in the web. As I sat alone in my apartment that night, watching the video again, one thing became clear: I was in the fight of my life. The truth was out there, but it was buried beneath layers of deception, and the more I uncovered, the more I realized that exposing it might just be the last thing I ever did. I couldn't sleep. Not after watching that video. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see were those shadowy figures around the hybrid leader, their whispered conversations, and the cold, calculating tone of the hybrid's voice. There was no turning back now. The conspiracy had become far more than I ever expected, and the truth I was uncovering was more terrifying than anything I had imagined. I spent the following days piecing together every scrap of information I had gathered, trying to make sense of it all. The more I dug, the more I realized how deep the rabbit hole went. The hybrids weren't just isolated to a single research facility or a few high-ranking officials. They were embedded throughout society, controlling everything from politics to business. They were shaping the world's future in ways that most of us couldn't even comprehend. But what was the final goal? What was the ultimate plan? That's when I stumbled upon the first major breakthrough, the key that would unlock the full scope of the conspiracy. I had been going through some old government files when a particular document caught my eye. It was marked top secret, something that hadn't been flagged before. The document outlined a plan called Project Genesis. At first glance, it seemed like another failed government initiative, a project that had been shut down decades ago. But as I read deeper, the true purpose of the project became clear. Project Genesis wasn't just a research program. It was the blueprint for the hybridization of the human race. The goal was to create a new breed of humans, superior beings, enhanced with alien DNA. These hybrids would be integrated into every level of society, from the government to the military, to business and beyond. They were meant to take over, to lead humanity into a new era, one in which the Watchers would control everything from the shadows. But there was more. The document contained a list of names of key political figures, military leaders, and influential business owners. People who had been identified as potential candidates for hybridization. The list was chilling. It wasn't just about creating hybrids. They were already among us, carefully placed in positions of power. And the most terrifying part? There were plans to create even more. The document referred to a hybrid army, a force that would eventually outnumber the rest of humanity, allowing the Watchers to assume full control. I was stunned. This wasn't just a covert operation, it was the foundation for a new world order. The hybrids were already in control, and now the Watchers were preparing to take things even further. They weren't content with merely observing humanity anymore. They wanted to dominate it. I needed to act fast. But how? I couldn't take this information to the authorities. If I did, I'd be silenced before I even got the chance to speak. I couldn't trust anyone. My only option was to go public, but doing so would come with unimaginable risks. If I exposed the truth, I'd be putting my life on the line. But the thought of letting the Watchers continue their plan without anyone knowing about it was unbearable. With the weight of this discovery on my shoulders, I decided to go on the offensive. I needed to find more evidence, something concrete that couldn't be denied, something that would force the public to pay attention. I couldn't let the Watchers' plan succeed. The world had to know what was happening before it was too late. I knew I was walking a dangerous line. The deeper I went, the more dangerous it became. But I couldn't back out now. The truth was out there, and I was the only one who could expose it. The clock was ticking, and every moment I spent gathering evidence brought me closer to a point of no return. It's strange how the mind works when you're on the brink of discovering something monumental. It starts to play tricks on you, making you second-guess every move, every piece of evidence. But this time, I couldn't afford to hesitate. Every lead I followed felt like a step closer to the truth, but it also made me feel like I was walking through a minefield. One wrong step, and everything could explode. I had been gathering information on the hybrid program for weeks, digging through endless stacks of government files, trying to make sense of the encrypted data I had uncovered. The more I read, the the more I realized just how far the hybrid program had gone. These beings weren't just created in laboratories. They were carefully cultivated, integrated into every facet of society. The list of names I had found was only the tip of the iceberg. The hybrids weren't a few isolated cases. They were a carefully orchestrated network of individuals, each placed strategically in positions of power. But I needed proof, something more than just documents and theories. I needed to see the hybrids for myself, to understand their true nature. That's when I received a tip. An anonymous source had contacted me, claiming to know where I could find them. They didn't give me much information, only a location, an abandoned facility outside the city. My instincts told me it was a trap, but at that point, I had nothing left to lose. I had to see this through. I had to know the truth. I arrived at the facility late at night, the area completely deserted. The building looked as if it hadn't been used in years, its windows boarded up, its doors rusted shut. It was a place long forgotten, a place no one would think to look. But as I stepped inside, I felt the weight of something watching me. I wasn't alone. I wasn't prepared for what I saw next. The room I entered was dimly lit, the air thick with dust and decay. But there, standing in the shadows, were figures, tall, almost impossibly tall, with perfectly symmetrical features. They were silent, their eyes glimmering in the low light. I couldn't make out their faces completely, but I knew they weren't human. Not completely. Their skin was too smooth, their movements too calculated. They weren't just people, they were something else entirely. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped forward, careful not to make a sound. These were the hybrids, the first real proof that the Watcher's plan was in motion. They were here, right in front of me, but they didn't notice me. They were too focused on something else, something I couldn't see. I hid in the shadows, watching them as they conversed in low, hushed tones. Their voices were strangely melodic, almost hypnotic. It was clear they were communicating in a way that was beyond anything I had ever heard. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that this wasn't just a secret government project. It was a carefully controlled operation. These hybrids weren't just playing a part. They were leading humanity toward an unknown future, a future where they ruled. I stayed hidden for what felt like hours, watching them as they went about their strange ritual. They spoke of the future, of the world they were creating, and of the power they would soon wield. It was unsettling to hear them discuss global politics as though they were already in control, shaping the course of history to fit their agenda. But then, just as I was about to leave, one of them, who I later learned was named Elias, looked straight at me. His eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I could feel his gaze penetrating me, as if he could see into my very soul. For a moment I thought he could read my mind, that he knew exactly what I was there to do. Without saying a word, he turned to the others, and they all began to leave the room in perfect unison, disappearing into the shadows. The air felt thicker, more oppressive as I left the building, my heart still racing. I had just encountered the hybrids, and what I had seen terrified me more than anything else I had uncovered. They weren't just watching us. They were controlling us. And now, they knew I was onto them. The encounter with Elias and the hybrids haunted me long after I left the facility. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen something that wasn't meant for human eyes. The hybrids weren't just alien beings. They were part of something far larger, something deeply entrenched in the very fabric of our government. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The Watchers had a hidden agenda, one that was years, maybe even decades, in the making. I knew I couldn't act on this discovery alone. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I needed to know how the government had been involved and why they had allowed the Watchers to integrate so deeply into society. This wasn't just a matter of aliens living among us. It was a full-scale manipulation of world events, and I had to uncover how deep the conspiracy really went. My next move was risky. I reached out to an old contact, someone who had worked directly with the government on covert operations during my time with the CIA. His name was Daniel Westbrook, a former field agent turned whistleblower. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew if anyone could shed light on the government's role in all this, it would be him. I arranged to meet him in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city, away from the prying eyes of anyone who might be watching. When I sat down with him, I could see the wariness in his eyes. He wasn't stupid. He knew something was wrong, but he wasn't sure who to trust anymore. "Look, Alex," he said, glancing around the cafe nervously. "I don't know how you got tangled up in this, but it's bigger than you think. The government doesn't just know about the Watchers. They've been working with them for decades. It's not just a few officials who are in on it. It's the whole damn system." My heart pounded as I listened. This wasn't the casual conversation I'd hoped for. This was a man who knew the truth, someone who had been directly involved in the government's darkest secrets. "What are they planning, Daniel?" I asked, leaning in closer. "They're creating a new world order," he whispered. "The hybrids are just the beginning. They've infiltrated governments, military ranks, and top corporations. They're manipulating world events, pushing humanity toward global conflict, so they can step in as saviors. It's all part of the plan." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "So, the Watchers are orchestrating global chaos?" "Exactly," he confirmed. "And it's not just the Watchers themselves. There's a faction within the government, a group of high-ranking officials who have been in on this for years. They've been setting the stage for the Watchers to take over. The hybrids are the bridge. They're being placed in key positions to ensure the smooth transition to this new world order. The plan is already in motion. The Watchers aren't just observing us anymore, they're preparing to control us." The weight of his words crashed down on me. This wasn't just about a secret alien agenda, it was about control. The Watchers, in collaboration with the government, were manipulating events, people, and entire nations to create a future where they ruled supreme. The hybrids weren't just secret agents. They were leaders, generals, CEOs, and politicians, all carefully placed in positions of power to ensure the takeover. "They've already infiltrated the highest levels of power," Daniel continued. "There's no stopping them now. Every move we make, every action we take, is part of their plan. And those who try to expose them are being silenced, either disappeared or discredited." I felt a cold chill run through me. I had been uncovering pieces of the puzzle, but this was something far bigger than I had anticipated. The conspiracy I was up against wasn't just about uncovering the truth, it was about survival. "They're watching everyone," Daniel said, his voice low. "And they know you're onto them. You need to be careful, Alex. Once you're in their sights, there's no way out." I had no illusions left. I wasn't just investigating a conspiracy. I was at the center of it, a pawn in a game I didn't understand. The government, the Watchers, the hybrids, they were all part of a larger plan, one that was already unfolding. As I walked away from the cafe, I knew that I had no choice but to keep going. The truth had to be exposed, no matter the cost. But I also knew that I was up against an enemy that was far more powerful than I could have ever imagined. And I had no idea who I could trust anymore. I never saw it coming. You can never truly prepare for a betrayal, especially when it comes from someone you trusted with your life. After Daniel's warning, I knew I had to be more cautious, but the walls I had put up weren't enough. I was still too close to the fire, and it was only a matter of time before the heat would burn me. I had spent the last few days reviewing all the documents I had gathered, trying to make sense of the bigger picture. But there was always one part of the conspiracy that nagged at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone within my circle was feeding information back to the Watchers, maybe even to the very faction within the government that had been orchestrating the hybrids' rise to power. I had a few suspects in mind, but I never thought it would be Emma. Emma was someone I had known for years, someone I had considered a close friend. She had been by my side during my time in the CIA, working alongside me on a number of operations. I always admired her intellect and her ability to stay calm under pressure. She was brilliant, resourceful, and in many ways my partner in everything. But now, standing in front of her in her apartment, I felt the weight of her cold stare, the way her eyes had shifted the moment I mentioned the hybrids. "You're getting too deep into this, Alex," she said, her voice calm, almost rehearsed. "You don't know who you're messing with. The people behind this, they're untouchable." Her words hit me like a slap, and for a split second, I felt a pang of doubt. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. But I already knew the answer. She stepped closer, a strange smile curling on her lips. "You're not the first one to come looking for the truth. But trust me, you'll be the last. People who get too close disappear. You're too far gone, Alex. There's no way out for you now." It clicked then, too many small details that I had brushed aside. The way she always seemed to know what I was working on, the subtle hints she dropped about my investigation, the way she had always been too quiet when I brought up the hybrid program. All of it pointed to one thing: Emma wasn't just part of the conspiracy, she was one of them. She had been feeding information to the very people I was trying to expose. I took a step back, my heart pounding. "You've been working with them, haven't you? You're one of them." Her smile widened. "You're so clever, Alex. I knew you'd figure it out eventually. But by the time you do, it'll be too late. The hybrids are already in control. And I'm just doing what needs to be done." I could feel my stomach drop. The weight of her betrayal hit me harder than anything else. Emma, my ally, my friend, had been playing me the whole time. She was one of the Watcher's operatives, planted to keep me in check, to steer me away from the truth without ever revealing her true nature. Before I could say anything, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, discreet device. She pressed a button, and a faint beat filled the room. My mind raced as I realized what she had just done. She had activated a signal, one that would alert the others to my location. "You won't make it out of this alive," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "You were always just a tool, Alex. But now you've outlived your usefulness." In that moment, everything came crashing down. I had trusted her, shared my suspicions, confided in her, and now I was standing here, realizing that I was walking into a trap of my own making. The betrayal was deeper than I could have ever imagined. I couldn't stay. I had to run, now. I bolted for the door, but as I reached for the handle, the door swung open with a force that knocked me back. Two men in dark suits stepped into the room, their expressions unreadable. "You've been compromised," one of them said, his voice low and threatening. "Come with us, Alex." Now. My heart raced as I realized the full extent of my situation. Emma wasn't just a traitor, she was a part of the larger web of deception that was suffocating me. These men were here to finish the job, to silence me before I could expose the truth. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I had to escape. I had to find a way to get out of this before it was too late. As I pushed past them, adrenaline coursing through my veins, I could hear Emma's voice behind me, distant and cold. "You'll never escape, Alex. They're always watching." I had never been one to shy away from danger. It was part of the job, part of the life I had chosen when I worked for the CIA. But this was different. This wasn't just about missions and protocols. It was about survival. The people after me were not just government agents. They were something far more sinister. The hybrids, the Watchers, they were everywhere, and I was suddenly on the run, caught in a web I wasn't sure I could escape. The men in dark suits were close behind. I could hear their footsteps echoing in the hallway, a constant reminder that every second I spent in this apartment was another second closer to being caught. I had no time to think. I had to act fast. I bolted through the door, out into the narrow hallway, and straight toward the fire exit. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder that I had to get away. The corridor was dark, eerily quiet. As I sprinted down the stairs, my footsteps the only sound I could hear. I had no plan, no backup. All I had was my training and the will to survive. I reached the bottom floor and pushed open the exit door, the cold night air hitting me like a slap in the face. I ran into the alleyway, looking over my shoulder to make sure I wasn't being followed. There was no sign of the men yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time before they caught up to me. As I sprinted through the dark streets, my mind raced. I had to find a place to lay low, somewhere they couldn't find me. But I also needed answers that were slipping further and further away as I ran. The betrayal by Emma had shaken me, but it had also given me a sense of urgency. I couldn't trust anyone, not even the people who had helped me in the past. I ducked into an alley and pressed myself against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. I needed to think, to make a plan. But just as I was about to move again, I heard footsteps approaching. My heart skipped a beat. I spun around, ready to fight, but I froze when I saw who it was. It was a woman, someone I didn't recognize. She was tall, with short, dark hair and a steely look in her eyes. She was dressed in black, blending into the shadows like a ghost. But there was something about her that told me she wasn't here to hurt me. In fact, I felt an odd sense of relief when she spoke. "Alex," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We need to talk." I didn't know who she was, but I knew that I needed help, and I needed it now. "Who are you?" I asked, still on edge. "How do you know my name?" She glanced over her shoulder, then stepped closer, her movements precise. "My name is Lena. I'm part of a group working to take down the hybrids. The ones you're after, they're not just part of the government. They've infiltrated everything, business, politics, even the military. But we're not blind to them. We've been tracking them for years." My mind was racing. I had no idea who Lena was or why she was helping me, but in that moment, I didn't care. I needed an ally, and it seemed like she was the only one who could help me now. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, still skeptical. "Because you're right," she said, her eyes narrowing with resolve. "The hybrids are planning something bigger than any of us realize. They're not just trying to take control, they're trying to shape the future of humanity. And if we don't stop them, they'll rewrite the world as we know it." I didn't have time to process everything she said. I had been running for too long, and I needed answers. I needed to know how to fight back. "So what now?" I asked. Lena stepped back, scanning the alley for any sign of movement. "We need to get you out of here. They know you're on their trail, and they'll be coming for you soon. I can help you get to a safe house where we can figure out our next move." I hesitated for a moment. It wasn't easy for me to trust anyone, not after what had happened with Emma. But there was something in Lena's eyes, a quiet confidence that made me believe she wasn't lying. "I'm in," I said, determination creeping into my voice. "Let's go." As we made our way through the streets, Lena filled me in on what she and her group had uncovered. They had been tracking the Watchers and the hybrids for years, quietly gathering information and looking for a way to expose the conspiracy. But it wasn't just about exposing them, they had to stop the plan from coming to fruition. The hybrids were far more organized and far more dangerous than I had realized. The safe house Lena was taking me to was hidden in plain sight, a seemingly ordinary building on the outskirts of town. Once inside, I was introduced to her team, people who had been working in the shadows, collecting intel, and making plans to take down the Watchers. I was still unsure of who to trust, but for the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. We spent the next few hours talking strategy, analyzing the intel I had gathered, and planning our next move. The hybrids were closer than we thought, and Lena's group had already made a few attempts to expose them. But every time they got close, something, or someone, seemed to stop them. It was clear that the Watchers were powerful, but they weren't invincible. The clock was ticking. The longer we waited, the closer the hybrids came to completing their plan. We had to act fast. But as I looked around the room at Lena and her team, I knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. The battle to stop the Watchers had only just begun. I hadn't expected to find any semblance of peace when I arrived at the safe house, but for the first time in weeks, I could breathe without the constant fear of being caught. We were safe, for now. But the truth, the full scope of what I was up against, was still looming over me like a storm on the horizon. The hybrids, the Watchers, they were far more than just an underground group of alien infiltrators. They were the architects of a new future. A future they had already begun to shape. And now, I was part of that fight. Lena's team and I had spent the last few hours discussing our options. There were plans in motion, secret networks working to expose the truth, but we were all acutely aware that the Watchers were always one step ahead. It wasn't just a matter of catching up, it was a race against time. And in this game, time wasn't on our side. The more Lena spoke, the more I realized how deep the infiltration ran. She was right. The hybrids weren't just in politics or business. They were in our military, in law enforcement, even in the media. They had woven themselves so thoroughly into the fabric of society that it was almost impossible to tell who was human and who wasn't. They weren't a separate entity anymore. They were humanity's future. "Alex," Lena said one evening as we gathered in the dimly lit safe house, "you need to understand something. The hybrids aren't just here to observe or control, they're here to lead. The Watchers aren't waiting for us to catch up. They've been planning this for generations, and now that the hybrids are in place, they're moving forward with their agenda." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the truth. I had known the hybrids were part of a larger plan, but hearing it from Lena made it feel more real. They weren't just lurking in the shadows. They were out in the open, leading humanity down a path they had meticulously crafted. "They've been breeding them for years," Lena continued. "The hybrids are more than just genetically altered beings. They're designed to take humanity's best traits and enhance them. They're faster, smarter, and more calculating than we could ever be. And they've infiltrated every level of society to ensure they're in control when the time comes." I couldn't wrap my head around it. How had it gone on for so long without anyone noticing? How had the world allowed this to happen? But then it hit me. The answer was simple. The hybrids didn't need to hide anymore. They were everywhere, embedded into the very systems that governed our lives. And the Watchers were working behind the scenes, pulling the strings. "They're working on something big," I said, more to myself than to Lena. "Something catastrophic. This new world order they're creating, it's not just about control. It's about reshaping the entire planet." Lena nodded grimly. "They've been setting the stage for a long time. The Watchers are pushing the world toward conflict, toward chaos. They want the old systems to collapse so they can rebuild them in their image. And the hybrids are their soldiers, their leaders in this new world. But we're not just sitting by and watching. We have one shot at this, Alex. We have to expose them before it's too late." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. All this time, I had thought the hybrids were simply part of a covert operation, a hidden experiment. But now I understood. They weren't just experiments. They were the vanguard of a new society, one that would be led by them. The old world was crumbling, and the Watchers were ready to rebuild it in their own image, with the hybrids as their leaders. I spent the next few days gathering everything I had, documents, video footage, and records of my meetings with the hybrids. I knew the evidence I had wasn't enough on its own to expose them, but it was a start. It was a glimpse into the truth, and that truth had to come out. It was the only way to stop the hybrids before they completed their takeover. But I was running out of time. Lena's team had already made several attempts to infiltrate the Watchers' network, but every effort had been thwarted. The Watchers had eyes everywhere, and their reach seemed to extend beyond anything we could have imagined. It was clear now, If we didn't act soon, the world would fall under their control. The hybrids would take their place at the top of society, and humanity would be relegated to the sidelines of their own future. But I wasn't ready to give up. I had seen too much, learned too much, to just walk away. The truth had to come out. And if exposing it meant risking everything, then so be it. I had no illusions left. I wasn't just fighting for the truth, I was fighting for the future of the human race. I was starting to feel like the walls were closing in on me. The hybrids, the watchers, and the factions within the government, they were all watching my every move, and I had no doubt that they were just waiting for me to make the wrong one. The safe house had become a temporary refuge, but it was no longer enough to protect me or the information I had gathered. The clock was ticking, and the watchers were growing closer with every passing day. Lena's group and I had spent hours planning, strategizing, and preparing for the next step. Every move had to be calculated, every piece of evidence had to be perfect. We had one shot at this, and I couldn't afford to screw it up. The problem was, I was still in the dark about the true scope of the Watchers' plans. I knew they wanted control, but what did they intend to do once they had it? We had to get to the heart of their operations. We needed to infiltrate their networks, expose their leadership, and bring their plans to light. But how could we do that when they controlled everything? From the highest levels of government to the most powerful corporations, the hybrids were everywhere. It felt like a mountain too high to climb. We need to get close to them, Lena said one evening as we sat around the table, poring over the latest intelligence. We need to find out who's really in charge of all this. Who's pulling the strings? But we can't do it from here. We need to get into their headquarters, into their core network. I nodded, my mind racing. I had been thinking the same thing, but there was a problem. We didn't have the resources, the manpower, or the access to infiltrate their inner circle. The hybrids were too well protected, and their operations were too carefully guarded. What's the plan, then? I asked. How do we get close to them without being noticed? Lena's eyes gleamed with determination. There's someone who might be able to help us, someone who knows the inner workings of the Watchers. A former ally of theirs who's turned against them. He's been living off the grid for years, but we've tracked him down. He has the information we need. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Who is he? His name is Victor Kane, Lena replied. He used to be one of the top hybrid operatives. But he had a falling out with the Watchers a few years ago and went into hiding. He's been helping resistance groups ever since, but he's extremely difficult to find. We've been able to locate him, but we don't have much time. The Watchers are aware that someone's been leaking information to us, and they're closing in on him. If we want his help, we need to move fast. The mention of Victor Kane was a game changer. If anyone had the knowledge we needed, it was him. He had been on the inside, he knew how the Watchers operated, and he might just be the key to bringing everything down. But I also knew that seeking him out was dangerous. The Watchers had eyes everywhere, and if they knew we were looking for Kane, we'd be walking into a trap. We have to find him before they do, I said, feeling the weight of the responsibility on my shoulders. How do we get to him? Lena pulled out a map and laid it on the table. She pointed to a location deep in the mountains, an isolated area where Kane had reportedly been living. It wasn't a place most people would think to look, but it was exactly the kind of place the Watchers wouldn't expect. This is where he's hiding, Lena said. We'll have to move quickly, cover our tracks, and make sure we don't leave a trail. I studied the map, my mind already calculating the risks. This is our best shot, isn't it? Lena didn't hesitate. It's our only shot. That was the moment I knew we had no choice but to go after Victor Kane. If we could find him, if we could convince him to share what he knew, it would change everything. But getting to him wouldn't be easy. We'd have to outsmart the Watchers, evade their surveillance, and navigate a world of lies and deception. The storm was coming. The Watchers were preparing for something massive, and I had no doubt that once they moved, it would be too late for anyone to stop them. But if we could expose their plans, if we could get the truth out to the world, there was still hope. I turned to Lena and the rest of the team. Let's get to Kane. We don't have much time. It was the kind of mission that made your heart race just thinking about it. Going after Victor Kane was one thing. He was an insider who could blow the lid off everything we'd been working toward. But the true risk was the Watchers themselves. They were not just watching from the shadows, they were preparing to act. If we didn't get to Kane in time, everything would be lost. Lena's plan was risky, but it was the only shot we had. She had gathered a small team of operatives, each one a former resistance fighter with specialized skills in surveillance, infiltration, and sabotage. The task was clear: locate Victor Kane, get the information we needed, and escape undetected. But there was no guarantee we would make it out alive. The Watchers were always one step ahead, and I could feel the tension in the air like static, ready to snap. The journey to Kane's hideout was grueling. We had to move quickly and quietly, cutting through forests, winding roads, and isolated villages. The location Lena had found was deep in the mountains, perfect for someone who wanted to disappear. But it also meant we were on our own. There was no backup, no way to call for help if things went wrong. As we drove through the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The Watchers were everywhere, and I was certain they knew we were coming. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, every time I glanced at the trees lining the road, I half expected to see someone following us, closing in on our every move. We reached the outskirts of the hideout by early morning. The area was eerily quiet, the mountains rising up like ancient sentinels watching over the valley below. There was no sign of movement, no guards, no vehicles, just the stillness of the wilderness. It was the calm before the storm, and I knew that any wrong move could set off a chain reaction that would bring the whole operation crashing down. We parked a few miles away from the hideout and set out on foot, moving through the dense forest to avoid detection. The closer we got, the more I could feel the weight of the situation pressing on me. This was it, the moment that would define everything. If we failed, the Watchers would win. The world would remain under their control, and there would be no turning back. When we finally reached Kane's hideout, I couldn't help but marvel at how well it was concealed. The building was old, a cabin tucked into the side of the mountain, blending in perfectly with the landscape. There were no signs of modern technology, no surveillance cameras, no guards. It was as if the place had been forgotten by time. But I knew better. This wasn't some random spot. It was carefully chosen, hidden in plain sight, just like everything the Watchers did. Lena signaled for us to stay low, and we approached the cabin cautiously. As we neared the door, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was the moment. We knocked softly, trying to make as little noise as possible. A few moments passed, and then the door creaked open. There, standing in the doorway, was Victor Kane. He looked exactly as I imagined, a man who had seen too much, a man who had been running for years. His eyes were tired, haunted, but there was something else there too, something that made me believe he could be our ally. "You're Alex?" he said, his voice rough, like he hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks. "I've been expecting you." I didn't have time for pleasantries. "We need your help, Victor. The Watchers, they're preparing for something big. We've been tracking them, but we're running out of time. We need you to tell us everything you know." Kane stepped aside, letting us in. "I've been running from them for too long," he said, closing the door behind us. "But it's too late for me to stop them now. What you need to know is that they're more powerful than you realize. Their plan isn't just about control. They're looking to take over every aspect of human life. And once they're in full control, there will be no stopping them." He walked over to a table in the center of the room and pulled out a series of maps and documents. "This is what they're after. he said, spreading the papers out. Global surveillance systems, bioweapons, mind control technology. The Watchers have been working in the shadows for decades, manipulating everything from elections to wars. But their final goal is far more dangerous than anyone realizes. As Kane spoke, I could feel the weight of his words settling in. The Watchers weren't just a secret group of extraterrestrials working behind the scenes. They were the masterminds of a global operation, one that spanned continents, industries, and governments. They weren't waiting for the world to accept them. They were planning to force humanity into submission. The hybrids are the key, Kane continued. They've already infiltrated every level of society. They've been breeding them for years, preparing them to take over. But there's something else, something even more dangerous. The Watchers are planning to initiate a global event, something that will shift the balance of power permanently in their favor. And once they do, there's no going back. I stared at the documents laid out before me, my mind racing. This was it. The Watchers' plan wasn't just about taking control of governments. It was about controlling the entire planet. They had everything in place to bring the world to its knees. But we still had one chance to stop them. We had to expose the truth. We had to make sure the world knew what was happening before it was too late. We need to stop them, I said, determination hardening my voice. What do we do next? Kane looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of resolve and regret. We expose them. We take this information to the world, to the people. But be warned, the Watchers are powerful, and they will stop at nothing to keep their plans hidden. If we fail, it won't just be the end of the resistance. It'll be the end of humanity as we know it. The storm was coming. And this time, there was no running. I had always known that in a battle like this, trust was a luxury. But I had never imagined that betrayal would come so swiftly, and from someone so close. After our meeting with Victor Kane, I felt like we were finally on the right path, like the pieces of the puzzle were finally falling into place. But sometimes, things are never as they seem. We spent the next few days preparing to expose the truth. Kane had given us everything we needed, detailed information on the Watchers' plans, access to confidential documents, and a map of their secret facilities. We had a strategy in place. We were going to leak this information to the public, starting with the most trusted news outlets. It wasn't going to be easy, and we knew the Watchers would do everything in their power to stop us, but we had to try. The plan was simple. Get the documents to the press, make sure the world knew the truth. Then, maybe, we could gather enough support to take down the hybrids and their sinister agenda. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot we had. But that was when everything fell apart. I had always trusted Lena. She had been my ally from the start, and her passion for stopping the Watchers matched mine. We'd been through a lot together, and I never once doubted her loyalty. But when I woke up one morning to find that she was gone, along with the documents we had gathered, I knew something was wrong. It didn't take long to realize what had happened. I tried reaching her. No answer. I checked her room at the safe house. It was empty, but there was a single note left on the desk, scrawled in hasty handwriting. It's over. The Watchers will prevail. Don't try to stop them. It's too late. The blood drained from my face. Lena had betrayed us. She had given the documents, everything we had worked for, to the Watchers. She had been working with them the entire time. The realization hit me hard. I had trusted her, confided in her, and now she had destroyed everything. The worst part was that I didn't know how long she had been playing both sides. How much of what she had told me was a lie. How much of the information she had given us had been manipulated. The seeds of doubt that had already been planted in my mind about who I could trust now grew into full-blown paranoia. I couldn't sit around and wait. I had to act fast. Lena had stolen the documents, but she didn't just take the physical copies. We knew she had sent the information to the Watchers' networks. The clock was ticking. The world might never know the truth if I didn't stop her. I gathered what was left of the team. Everyone was on edge. No one could believe what had happened. We had to move quickly, find Lena, and stop the information from reaching the Watchers. We had one chance to recover the data before it was too late, and we weren't going to let Lena's betrayal undo everything we had worked for. We tracked her down to a remote location outside the city. I knew she would try to make contact with someone from the Watchers. It was her last move, ensuring that the truth stayed buried and that the Watchers could continue their plan without interference. When we arrived at the location, it was clear that Lena had already been there, but she was gone. Her trail was cold. The only thing we found was a series of encrypted files on her laptop, which we quickly downloaded. But it was no use. The Watchers had already begun to implement their next phase. I felt a mixture of rage and despair. The plan to expose the Watchers was falling apart, and it was all because of Lena's betrayal. She had been working with them from the start, a double agent feeding them information, buying them time while we exposed ourselves to danger. It wasn't just a setback, it was a full-scale disaster. But there was no time to wallow in anger. The mission hadn't changed. We had to stop the Watchers from taking over. We had to find a way to recover the data Lena had stolen, expose the truth, and rally the world to fight back. There was still hope. But I wasn't going to stop until I had answers. I wasn't going to stop until the truth was out. And if Lena had chosen to side with the Watchers, that was her decision. But it would be the last decision she ever made. The stakes had been raised. The Watchers had control, but we still had the will to fight. The war was far from over. There's a moment in every battle when you realize that you've crossed the point of no return. It's the moment when all your choices have led you to one inevitable conclusion: either you fight with everything you have or you lose. And I had already lost too much to turn back now. The truth had to be exposed, and if I didn't act fast, the Watchers would succeed in their plan. The world would be theirs, and humanity would never know the truth. The betrayal by Lena had cut deep. I couldn't trust anyone anymore, and the weight of that uncertainty felt like a constant pressure, threatening to crush me. But I couldn't afford to dwell on the betrayal. I had to focus on the mission, on what needed to be done. The Watchers had to be stopped. We had one shot left. We had recovered part of the data Lena had stolen, and there was just enough to link the Watchers directly to the global events they had been orchestrating. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to expose their network to the world. I knew the media would be our most powerful weapon. If we could get the truth into the hands of the public, the Watchers' grip on the world would weaken. It was our only hope. The plan was simple, but dangerous. We would broadcast the evidence directly to the most trusted news outlets, ensuring that it couldn't be erased or suppressed. The problem was that we didn't have much time. The Watchers were already moving forward with their plans that involved global surveillance systems, new bioweapons, and a total reshaping of the political and social landscape. The future they were building was one where they controlled everything, and humanity was nothing more than a pawn in their game. I stood with the team, looking at the encrypted files we had recovered. Every document, every piece of evidence, was vital. This was the final push. If we could get this information to the world, we could stop the Watchers. But if we failed, if we didn't make it, everything we had fought for would be lost. "Are you ready?" Lena's voice echoed in my mind, even though she wasn't here. I couldn't shake the thought of her betrayal, but I had to keep moving. I had to push past the pain and focus on what mattered. The Watchers were out there, waiting to destroy us. I wasn't going to let them win. The plan was set into motion. We'd been able to hack into secure networks used by the Watchers, but getting the data into the hands of journalists was another story. The networks were locked down tight, and even with our best efforts, there was no guarantee we'd be able to break through in time. I headed to the rendezvous point, my heart pounding in my chest. The fear was there, always, but there was also a flicker of hope. If we could just make it, just get the truth out, it could change everything. The world had to know. The world deserved to know. As we approached the broadcast station, I felt the weight of the situation more than ever. We were on the edge, teetering between success and failure. The Watchers were powerful, yes, but they weren't invincible. And neither were we. We were fighting for the future, for the truth, and for everything humanity had left. We infiltrated the station as quickly and quietly as we could. Time was slipping away, and with each passing second, I could feel the Watchers getting closer. The facility was secured, and we had no time to waste. We had one shot to get this right. Inside, we bypassed security and accessed the broadcasting system. Our hearts raced as we began uploading the files. The truth was just a few clicks away from being exposed. The world was about to see what the Watchers had been hiding. The truth would break through their walls of secrecy, and humanity would be forced to reckon with the reality they had been living in. Then, just as we were about to press the final button, the door crashed open. "Step away from the system," a cold voice commanded. I froze. There, standing in the doorway, was a hybrid. His features were perfect, too perfect, and the expression on his face was one of quiet menace. I knew immediately that this was no ordinary operative. This was someone who had been bred for leadership. "You think you can stop us?" he sneered. "You think the world will accept the truth? The Watchers have already won. You're too late." I didn't have time to argue. I lunged toward the system, determined to finish what we started. But the hybrid was faster. He grabbed my arm and yanked me back. His grip was iron, unyielding. "You don't understand," he said, his voice like ice. "We've been preparing for this moment for decades. You're a fool if you think you can stop it now." But I wasn't ready to give up. Not after everything we had fought for. With a burst of adrenaline, I pushed him off me, slamming him against the wall. He staggered, but I knew I didn't have much time. "Do it now!" I shouted to the team. In that moment, the team hit the final button. The files were uploaded. The world was about to learn the truth. The hybrid recovered quickly, but it was too late. The broadcast had begun. "You're too late," he muttered, eyes narrowing. "You've exposed us, but you've only sealed your fate." I didn't care. The truth was out there. And now, the world would see it. The world wasn't ready for what had just happened. I had seen the hybrid's face as he left, his expression one of fury and defeat. He knew what we had done. He knew that the truth was now in the hands of the public, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the screen as the files began to broadcast. The documents, the video footage, the images, everything we had worked so hard to uncover was now out in the world, available for anyone to see. There was no going back. The Watchers had been exposed. But the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Alex," Lena's voice broke through the silence. "We've done it. It's out there. We've given them the truth." I turned to face her, the weight of the moment heavy on my shoulders. We had won, yes. But the battle was just beginning. The Watchers were too powerful, too entrenched in society. They wouldn't go down quietly. They would fight back, harder than ever, to regain control. And there was still the question of the hybrids, those leaders planted in every corner of the world. They weren't going to just accept defeat. "We've exposed them," I said quietly, staring at the screen. "But we can't stop here. This is just the beginning. We've given the world a glimpse of the truth, but now we need to help them understand it." Lena nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "We've sparked the fire. Now we need to make sure it doesn't burn out." We didn't have much time. The Watchers had eyes everywhere, and we knew they would be coming for us. They had resources, they had power, and they had a long history of manipulating the world's events to suit their needs. But now, we had a chance to turn the tide. The truth was out, and with it came a new sense of urgency. People would demand answers, and they would demand change. But just as I was about to speak, the building shook. A deep, resonating sound, a blast. The Watchers were here. Lena grabbed my arm. They've found us. We need to go, now. The urgency in her voice snapped me back to reality. We had exposed the truth, but we weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. We ran, quickly, through the back exits of the station, trying to stay ahead of the chaos. There were sirens wailing, distant shouts, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps closing in. They had to know we were responsible for the broadcast. They had to know we were the ones who had ripped the veil from their world. We need to regroup, I said, panting as we reached the alley. We need to get the rest of the information out to the world, make sure the Watchers can't cover it up. We will, Lena replied. But we need to survive first. We ran through the dark streets, dodging security patrols and trying to stay out of sight. The Watchers were everywhere. Their agents were closing in on us, and it was only a matter of time before they found us. But we weren't giving up. Not now. We had exposed them. We had given the world a chance to see the truth, and the truth was far more powerful than any of their secrets. The Watchers would fight back. They would try to erase the information, to silence those who had revealed their plan. But the world was watching now. And the people weren't going to let the Watchers control them any longer. As we reached the outskirts of the city, the sounds of the chaos behind us began to fade. We had made it out, for now. But we knew this was far from over. The Watchers would keep fighting, but we were ready. We had exposed the truth, and now it was time for the world to rise up against the shadow they had cast for so long. We didn't have all the answers. But we had one thing that no amount of power could ever take from us: hope. The truth had been revealed, and there was no turning back. This was only the beginning of a new chapter.